still missing, way too early, we're still missing 4, if I count correctly. Hello. We count on 2, getting better.
Class president is probably in the swimming pool. Ishan is on here. I saw him.
Which I can perfectly understand. So let's start with this.
It's Abdullah is not here.
Abdullah and
Ishan.
Yeah.
They're both in the study room.
I know.
They're in the study room.
Yeah.
Michael.
So I came here to check the.
阿布拉的那个大教室，一山在手上。
他们忘记了吗？
Last session, last class today, which will be a simple one. It will just be a brief outlook on the trends and the differences we see in German, European transaction style versus US transaction style. We have, I think, throughout the last sessions, already touched numerous of the topics I'm talking about today. So this should be fairly quick. And I don't want to do a full class today. I have some homework brought back, so we will circulate that. We will talk through the overall homeworks. And I'd urge you to ask remaining questions, because there will be an exam, a written test coming up, as you know. I think I have given one or the other hint already, what is really, really, really important. So you might expect one or the other questions in that regard in the written exam. So let's start with trends in M&A. As we all know, we have a very seller-friendly environment. This means that we see an auction process in most cases with strict timeline requirements and with certain differentiations to a one-on-one transaction process. Besides what is mentioned here, strict process and timeline requirements, as well as high multiples and valuations, anyone, in addition to that, comparison between one-on-one process and an auction process. What do we find in an auction process? What we don't see in a one-on-one process. Hello.
Printing.
Yeah.
Oh. As usual, didn't get the print.
Vendor due diligence report. You say we see that in an auction process, or we don't see it in an auction process?
We see it in the auction process, but rarely in the private transaction.
Okay, that's a good example. Another one, please.
Teaser, LOI.
Teaser would be for an auction process. Yeah. LOI would be for a one-on-one process. What else? NDA. NDA. Yes. We have it in both situations, right? Do we have a chance in an auction process to negotiate the NDA? No. Another opinion?
At least at the beginning, I think. When it
Well,
is,
once it is signed, so you cannot negotiate after the sign.
once it is distributed with this process letter,
Yep.
you cannot negotiate, but when you also come to the final stage, I think you the same like the private sale. I assume.
Another opinion? So let me allow you to agree to disagree. You can negotiate an NDA in both situations, private sale and auction sale. Of course, if you start negotiating an NDA in an auction process, when you start negotiating an NDA in an auction process, you just have to be very careful, because you would only negotiate important aspects, not nice to have aspects, because it's an auction process. You want to stay in the auction process. You don't want to be proof difficult at the very beginning. Okay? Okay. Let's talk about purchase price. Lockbox purchase price, we all know how it works. Tell me the 3 dates we need to be aware of.
Sign date. Closing date. Effective date.
Okay. The lockbox purchase price is calculated as of which date? Effective date. Lockbox purchase price, the date for which it is calculated is the effective date purchase price, and this is typically the last available balance sheet. Remember the nice picture. Remember this one. The lockbox purchase price, we pay the agreed lockbox purchase price at closing. Any adjustment with respect to the lockbox purchase price possible?
Maybe interest.
Interest. To be very precise, this is actually not an adjustment to the lockbox purchase price. That stays as is, but it's an add-on. What is the economic argument to get interest on the lockbox purchase price?
Because the seller gets the money later, and after the effective date, the economic profit and loss belongs to the buyer.
Yes, that's absolutely correct. Attendance lists already, everyone? Okay. Thank you. You can make your sign as well. All right. Closing date balance sheet adjustment, that's more US style, because it is more seller friendly. Lockbox purchase price, it's buyer friendly. Lockbox purchase price is seller friendly because it's a fixed price, right? There's no adjustment to the disadvantage of the seller. So for the closing date balance sheet adjustment, what do we have to do?
Leakage protection.
Sorry?
Leakage protection. Oh, sorry.
Do you want to correct it?
Not leakage.
Where does leakage belong to?
Leakage belongs to the
Lockbox.
lockbox.
Yes. What does leakage do?
To prevent the seller to take out the profit dividends.
Yes, absolutely. During that time period from the effective date till the closing date, where the profits and the losses belong already to the buyer. So again, what do we need to do closing date balance sheet adjustment?
Find target balance sheet.
Target balance sheet. Preliminary purchase price based on target balance sheet. Negotiate each individual business balance sheet line item. Create a formula to come to the preliminary purchase price. On the closing date, you pay the preliminary purchase price. After closing, post-closing, there is a closing date balance sheet established. You compare the target balance sheet with the closing date balance sheet, the agreed upon balance sheet line items, the same formula, you come to the final purchase price. And the difference between preliminary and final purchase price is the adjustment, both ways. Okay. There's one addition. Closing date balance sheet is in particular not often used in German European transactions, because in the very beginning of a calendar year, first quarter, even second quarter, the last available balance sheet, year's end balance sheet, is close enough to the signing closing date, so that the actual value, the argument is that the value of the company may not really change in that first quarter. So you can use a lockbox purchase price. Simplifies the process. Now you have to, when these arguments are made, you basically have to check whether it is seasonal business you're buying. So if the first quarter does not change because supplier, customer, profit and loss of the company is basically the same every year, then it is possible to, well, it is acceptable, easily acceptable for a buyer to go with the lockbox principle. However, if you have seasonal business, ups and downs, the lockbox purchase price, even in the first quarter, may not reflect the actual value. Okay? Earn out. When is an earn out paid?
Post-closing.
Post-closing. How is it calculated? Typically.
Depends
Or
on.
what is the benchmark? Put it.
For example, the some financial covenants, the ratios they agreed upon the agreement, like some milestones. If you achieve such as EBIT, like how much, and then you get the earn out.
You get additional payment for the company. Yes. What is the critical aspect in an earn out scenario?
The seller remains the management in that target company.
Yes, that is good for the seller.
Yes.
What if the buyer does not want that? And the seller may not want it either. They want to sell 100% but still get an earn out. What is the critical situation? For the seller.
Make sure that the company is in control after closing.
That's the point. She said make sure that the company is under control after closing. It's earn out protection. As a seller, you have to ensure that the buyer cannot influence in a negative way the relevant criteria for the calculation of the earnout. So if you think of a very simple earnout model, there's an earnout if the annual turnover is above a certain number. So you can lower annual turnover if you shift business from this entity to another entity of your group. Then this turnover is taken out of the relevant company, which means that the sellers may not get an earnout whatsoever. You can just take that away. So you have to protect the seller in order to create value out of such earnout provision. This is always in dispute. I have rarely seen an earnout clause which later, when it comes to a payment or calculation of an earnout, has not been disputed. Again, the interests are diametral. Seller wants more than buyer wants to give, as always. Closing conditions. What closing conditions do we typically have in a mid to large cap transaction? Suggestions?
Merger control.
Merger control. National security.
authorization of the company?
No way.
No way.
No way. That is pre-signed.
Merger clearance.
We had that.
Foreign exchange regulation.
Foreign exchange regulation. No internal approval of purchase. It's not acceptable. That must be pre-signing. Otherwise, it's a very simple walk-away right. Seller just telling you, a buyer's just telling you, I don't get internal approval for this transaction. Have a good day. No? Financing condition, not acceptable in most cases. You have to have the money. Material adverse change. US style, very common. What does this provision do as a CP? What does it mean?
To protect the business, the value, back in the business or for the company.
What is the difficulty with such a MAC clause here? It's just if you say no material adverse change to the financial and operational status of the target. That is the MAC clause. What is the problem with that clause?
It's very vague, not
Yes.
set implicit. So there are a lot of disputes about the definition of the MAC.
Yes. It's an undefined legal term. There's no statutory definition on that. Parties certainly have different views depending on which side you are, what material is and what not. So you have to negotiate and define what material adverse event actually means. Regulatory clearance, we talked about that. It's merger control, it's FDI. What is the difference between FDI and merger control in terms of closing? The legal difference. Can you close if you have FDI review clearance? Of course.
Yes.
Can you close if you don't have FDI review clearance? Suggestions? It's 50-50
You
chance?
can close, but if later the authority decide otherwise, you have to.
You can't close. I don't think so. You can close if FDI clearance is not provided.
You can close with FDI clearance is not required.
You can't.
You can.
You can.
It's a difference to merger control. Merger control, if you don't have merger control clearance, you cannot close. It's prohibited. If you don't have FDI clearance in Germany, you can close. But, as you said, in case the authorities review this transaction from an FDI standpoint of view after you have closed, they have 5 years time to do that, they can still review and say no, or impose conditions. So while you can close, factually, no one is closing if you don't have the clearance, if you apply for it. Clear?
One more question.
Yeah.
Starting from consequence. About the internal approval of purchase.
Yeah.
Can you explain?
Shareholder approval. For example, you have a GmbH, and the GmbH included in its articles of association that the acquisition of shares, the formation of a new company, the formation of a subsidiary requires the consent of the shareholders. Which means if that company wants to acquire a target company, they have to ask their shareholders to approve. That's the internal approval process. That's really the shareholder process. You can have a group of companies where you have board approval requirements as well. So this is really internal. Okay?
So this kind of things like with the financing funds are also should be put in the rep and warranty. The sellers buyers rep and warranty, right?
That they have the money.
The authorization and they have money.
Yeah, that's always included, but what does it help if they don't have the money?
So they
Just
have
imagine
okay.
you have a fund situation. Okay, oh, there's one. You have the target. You have the buyer being an SPV, so an empty shell company. Yeah? Nothing in it. Created just for the purpose of the transaction. There you have 100% another company. And there you go, at some point in time you go abroad. And there's a fund. There is the SPA. If you get a guarantee that they have the money, it's worth nothing. Because this company
We want to see the
has no money.
Yeah.
So in this kind of situation, you need to have a parent guarantee up to that company where the money is. Which is difficult in a fund situation. Fund situation is separate. Fund situation, either the fund has the money, that is possible, or the fund needs to draw down from its investors, so that the fund doesn't have the money either. But in that case, you want to see the investment documentation and the equity commitment letters. That's a different scenario. Okay.
So it's you will present that kind of documentation upon the signing.
Yes, of course.
Okay. So on the signing day, you have to see that documentation and then you sign.
Yeah.
And
Well, before the signing day.
before the signing day, okay.
Because you need time to review that. And for an equity commitment letter, you will negotiate that as well.
Will you also be like after reviewing that the signing date, you will also put that things in separate representation and warranty of the buyer in the SPA agreement?
Again, this is an empty company.
Yeah.
This is a shelf company.
Okay.
Nothing in it. It's of no value to have this company guarantee anything. So if you put documentation into that, you need to have that respective company being party to the SPA who actually has the value, who can guarantee it. Otherwise, you have a nice rep, you can make a claim against that empty shell company, you can go to court, you get a nice verdict, you pay the court fees, and you can enforce nothing. Because this company is empty. It is not that bad, because if you have a guarantee of that company that it has the purchase price, and we all know it's worth nothing, you will only transfer the shares to that company on the condition that the purchase price at the same time comes to your account. And only once the purchase price is credited to your account, only then the shares transfer. So bottom line, this concept of a rep that you have the money is, in a German transactional point of view, totally meaningless. Because you will never have a damage. You will only give away your shares once you have the money. No second before. This rep concept of I have the money, that is US style. Because they need it.
Why
Because they don't transfer simultaneously upon the payment of the purchase price, which is as stupid as you can be. And in a merger situation, so there's a tripartite merger agreement in the US possible. But that's not, you know, let's not go into that. Important is, in a German transaction point of view, the shares only transfer when the money is on the account of the seller, no second before. Of course, no one wants to sign an agreement and find out 3 months later that there's no money. Okay? Okay. Reps and warranties. Yes, very limited in terms of scope in an auction process, even more so. And we have numerous qualifiers to limit the scope of the reps and warranties. Remember the knowledge qualification, the materiality threshold, the fair disclosure concept. Can you explain what the fair disclosure concept is? I'm open for suggestions.
Access to data room.
Data room is the right key word, but it's not about access. What does fair disclosure concept mean when you think of data room?
That means when the access is given to the buyer's legal team to the data room, it is deemed that they have fair and reasonable access. And the seller has disclosed fair and reasonable way the information that is required.
Can we specify that a bit?
Like agreements.
Yeah, I'm fine with data room. Is it important whether or not the purchaser has received access, or whether the legal advisors actually looked into the data room? Is that important for the fair disclosure concept? I have a no.
They have a fair opportunity given for them to look if they want to.
So the answer is it's not important whatsoever whether the purchaser has checked the data room. Fair disclosure concept means in the SPA that there has been a data room. The data room has been provided by a data room provider, and the purchaser had the option to look into the data room. And fair disclosure means that every circumstance or fact or event which could be a breach of a warranty, breach of a rep and warranty, if that fact, circumstance, or event is disclosed in the data room in such a way that a professional buyer using professional advisors could find that, then it is fairly disclosed, and it is deemed actual knowledge of the purchaser, which in the consequence means that if you have knowledge of a fact or circumstance which materializes then as a breach of warranty, you cannot make a claim. That's an important concept to limit seller's liability. Direct damages, remember there are other damages as well, like indirect damages, loss of profits, consequential damages, and so forth. De minimis, basket, and caps are standard. Remember the picture, the famous 100 million, and the related numbers of de minimis and basket, and all the options to limit seller's liability, which is time limitation, which is knowledge, which is caps, de minimis, baskets, the differentiation between fundamental reps and operational reps. What is a fundamental rep?
Comprehensive free.
They own the shares.
ownership of shares,
freedom of encumbrance,
and freedom from encumbrances. Operational,
corporate labor.
Legal,
Yeah.
information, financial.
corporate. Corporate only partially, because corporate is partially fundamental. We have HR pension. We have come on. What else do we have?
IT, IP,
ITIP,
environment.
environment.